Hello, welcome and thank you for joining us today for the next webinar in our What's New series. In today's webinar, we'll cover some of the newest features in Microsoft 365 that you can implement in your business, as well as covering some brand new features that give us a bit of an insight into the future of where Microsoft is headed. In today's webinar, we're also going to have a little bit of time at the end to focus on a question that has come up a number of times and is actually requested by one of our regular attendees about recording of Teams meetings. So we'll cover that towards the end of the webinar as well. Don't feel like you need to make notes or take it all in straight away, as we'll be sending out a recording of the webinar and a follow-up fact sheet later today. Also, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box in the side panel. You can do that at any time, and I'll try to cover as many of those as I can as we go along. There will also be a dedicated time for questions at the end of the webinar, so if you want to ask questions then please feel free. So let's take a look at what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. First of all, we'll be looking at hybrid meetings in Microsoft Teams with the new companion mode. We'll be taking a look at open text question polls for Teams meetings, updates to SharePoint folder naming. We'll be looking at how you can mute notifications during meetings. Then we'll be looking at the Teams Approvals app, and we'll be looking at recording and transcription in Teams meetings as requested. Finally, we'll be wrapping up with what's next and how you can start to implement some of these new ideas into your organisation. So thank you for joining us again, everyone who's been with us before on these webinars, and welcome to all the new faces that have joined us today. My name is Jennifer Benge and I'm the Marketing Manager at Bedrock. Bedrock is an IT managed service provider and a Microsoft partner. This means that most of the tech we implement is based on the Microsoft stack. This includes Microsoft 365, Microsoft Teams, Azure, SharePoint, etc. We're also experts in secure, resilient networks and manage IT solutions where high performance is critical. So we work with organisations that have some of the highest security requirements in the UK. The most important thing we want to achieve, no matter what your organisation does, is to help your business grow better. We do this with the help of our 8 rocks. These 8 rocks are data, skills, backup, investment, strategy, security, quality of service, and the one I've left till last is collaboration. Collaboration is the focus of today's webinar, as at their heart, Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams are both collaboration tools. So using them fully is a way to ensure better collaboration within your organisation. They're also ones that people are most familiar with. So most people will have experience of using Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Teams, but they aren't using them to their full capacity, which is why we wanted to start these webinar series to really help you get the most out of your investment. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first item on our agenda today. Okay, so many of us now are either fully back in the office or part-time in the office. We're doing part hybrid, part working from home, part in the office. So this is great in terms of being able to see our colleagues again, but it can pose some difficulties in terms of meetings. Sometimes it's actually easier to conduct a meeting if everyone is either virtual or everyone's in person. This hybrid world that we're entering into can pose its own problems. If you're attending an in-person meeting that has a Microsoft Teams room or Surface Hub set as the location, then you can join with your iPhone when you enter the room or at any point during the meeting. Why might you do this? So if you're in the room attending the meeting in person, then it's handy just to have your device in front of you to keep an eye on the chat features that are going on. So people who are working from home still, who may be joining the meeting virtually, may still be using the chat box to enter in their queries or questions or contributions. By everyone keeping an eye on the chat box, no matter if they're virtual or in person, it can really help everyone feel involved, integrated, and there's no sort of second-class citizen whether you're in the office or virtual. It's worth noting that currently this feature is only available on iPhone, but there are plans to expand this to Android in the future. If you're using a Microsoft Teams room that runs on Windows or Android, both of these will work with the iPhone. In order to use this new feature, from your iPhone, turn on Bluetooth and make sure it's enabled for Teams. Open Teams when you're in the meeting room, and then just tap Join with Room. You'll be joined to the room and on your iPhone at the same time. Teams will then automatically mute the camera and mic on your iPhone as before it enters the meeting, just to avoid that horrible ricocheting echo effect that you get if you have two microphones running next to each other. Once it's joined, and if you, for example, move away from the meeting room, if you have to head out into the office and do something else, you'll then be able to turn on the mic and camera if you need to remain connected to that meeting. After you've joined the meeting, you'll be able to react, chat, share, and more from your iPhone device that's in front of you, as well as collaborating in the in-person meeting itself. So like I say, only available on iPhone at the moment, but there are plans to expand this further as well. Next up, we've got open text polls in Teams meetings. Again, with people working in a distributed fashion, they could be all over the place at the moment, it's quite nice to be able to do polls to get people engaged in the meeting. So this is a new feature for the Microsoft Forms feature of Teams that has been available for quite a while. It's called Word Cloud Poll. So you can use this type of poll to collect attendees' open-ended responses before, during, or after a meeting, and the results will then be automatically aggregated and displayed as a word cloud. So the example you can see that Microsoft have used here is how are you feeling today? You could also use it to understand people's level of confidence in something you've perhaps just explained in a meeting, and get other brainstorm kind of ideas that you want to be displayed in this word cloud. So that's something to have a go with if you're interested in using that kind of feature to up engagement in your meetings. Next up, we've got updates to SharePoint folder naming. Now, this is something we at Bedrock see fairly often, is that not everyone completely understands the link between SharePoint and Teams. So in fact, the file system that you see within your Teams is actually the same as you have in SharePoint. So you can see here on the screen, I've shared screenshots of our SharePoint sales and marketing group and overlaid that with a screenshot of my Teams, and you see the files are exactly the same across both. Now, up until now, if you were to rename that team or one of the channels within the team, it wouldn't always automatically update in SharePoint, and that could create some confusion. So with this update, when renaming a Teams channel, the corresponding SharePoint folder will be renamed to reflect the new name. This will help create consistency across the Microsoft 365 endpoints, making it easier for users to find their files from anywhere. So if you know it's called something within Teams, you want it to have that same consistent name within SharePoint as well. This new feature will be available for all standard and private channels. For standard channels, the corresponding folder in SharePoint will be renamed. For private channels, the corresponding site name and the folder in SharePoint will be renamed. For legacy Teams channels that were renamed prior to this rollout, that won't be updated. So you'll have to go back and just double check that those naming conventions are the same across SharePoint and Teams. But if a legacy channel is renamed after this release, it will simultaneously rename the corresponding SharePoint folder, just to keep everything really up to date and organized across both SharePoint and Teams. Now, this one isn't a new feature, but it's something I wanted to cover while we were on the topic of SharePoint, because again, many people don't realise the way they can use SharePoint. Many people do use SharePoint to store their files within the cloud, but they still prefer the older File Explorer view. So there's good news, you can still access that exact same File Explorer view using SharePoint. So if you remember the files that I had listed on the previous slide, and you now look at the picture that I've added to this slide, the exact same file names are visible within File Explorer here. That's because I have synced the files across from my Teams/SharePoint into File Explorer. With Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, you can sync files between your computer and the cloud, so you can get to your files from anywhere. Synced files will appear in your File Explorer on your computer. If you add, change, or delete a file in your File Explorer, then the changes will sync to Teams and SharePoint and vice versa. So it's worth bearing in mind if you're suddenly having a tidy up within your file view, those updates will sync back into Teams and SharePoint. So make sure that you're absolutely doing the right thing and not deleting things that you're absolutely going to rely on later on. You can work with your synced files directly in File Explorer, and access your files even when you're offline. Whenever you're online, any changes that you or others have made will sync automatically. To sync channel files to your File Explorer, go to the Channel Files tab in Teams or the top menu in SharePoint and select the Sync button. You may be asked to sign in to OneDrive for Business. Once this has been completed, you will see a folder in your File Explorer named with the team and channel name. So on the left-hand side there below the Quick Access menu, you can see that I've got the OneDrive for Bedrock and the general folder has synced across into my File Explorer. The blue cloud icon means that files and folders are only available online. So in the files, you can see under the status heading, there are a couple of blue clouds there. That means I'll only be able to access those while I'm online. The green tick means that the file or folder is downloaded to your device and you can open it and edit it without being connected to the internet. Any changes you make while you're offline will automatically sync when you reconnect to the internet. So SharePoint's really clever in this respect, that it knows which files you've been working on most recently and will download those to your device so you can work on them from anywhere, regardless of whether you're connected to the internet or not. So just keep an eye on those status icons and they will tell you whether you're able to work on those folders and files online or offline, depending on your internet connection. But do remember, any changes that you make will be synced back to the cloud, back into SharePoint and Teams, as soon as you reconnect to the internet. Next up, we have the Teams Approvals app. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself there. We have the how to mute notifications during meetings. So this is a new feature that has come to Teams this month. It is how to mute notifications in individual meetings. So this is the you'll now be able to mute notifications during meetings and thereby helping you to focus. So you can choose to do this either for all meetings or on a per meeting basis. To turn off notifications during all meetings, go to Settings, then Notifications, then Meetings and Calls, and toggle the Mute Notifications During Meeting button. To turn off notifications during a specific meeting, which is the example I've got on the screen here, you just need to click on the ellipsis menu during that call or meeting and choose Mute or Allow Notifications. I think for the majority of people, I know for me personally, I quite like to have my meetings, my notifications still available during most meetings. So some team catch-ups, some quicker, not so important meetings, you can have your notifications on just to keep an eye on anything else that comes in. But for some meetings, you absolutely need really solid focus. So it's worth turning the notifications off for those individual meetings. And this is a really simple update that allows you to do that. Okay, next up, we have the Teams Approvals app. Actually, for a quick overview of this, because we haven't actually covered Teams Approvals app in these webinars before, so I just wanted to give you a quick overview to let you know what it is. Approvals in Microsoft Teams is a way to streamline all your requests and processes within your team or with external partners as well. You'll be able to create new approvals, view the ones sent to you, and see all of your previous approvals in one place. You can set up approvals for expense requests, customer discounts, and other reports, and in all kinds of file types as well. In the Approvals Hub, you'll see all of your approvals that you've been sent or you have received, including the ones that are already complete. Approvals show up across all of your systems, including Power Automate, SharePoint, and Microsoft Dynamics 365, if you're a Microsoft Dynamics user. The update with this Approvals app for this month is that you can now make comments mandatory within the Teams Approvals app. So if you're a user of Teams Approvals already, and you've already been using this for quite a while, you may have noticed that up until now you haven't had to leave a comment or you haven't received a comment with every approval notice. It's now down to the administrator within your organisation to decide whether you set that as mandatory or not. Getting an approval request with no explanations, getting it rejected with no explanations is really frustrating, and it can waste everyone's time just by going backwards and forwards via email while the person who submitted that request tries to find out why it got rejected, what they need to do to get it approved in the future, and the person whose job it is to approve is replying to them, letting them know what they need to do. As a team owner or admin, you can now make your approval templates have mandatory comments for when a user responds to a request, creating transparency behind the approver's decision. Admins can set all approval requests to have mandatory comments from the team's admin portal settings. This will affect simple approval requests and templated approval requests. So worth noting, if you're a user of Teams Approvals app already, that's something you can think about, whether you want to turn on this feature of making sure that the notes is mandatory, just so you get feedback on these approvals and why they got accepted or rejected. So here we go onto the section that we've had requests for. Recording and transcription of Teams meetings. This is something we've covered a number of times over certain different webinars over the last year, but it's something Microsoft are bringing updates to all the time. So it is really worth revisiting and making sure everyone in your organisation knows how to best use recording and transcription, and where and when they need to turn it off and on, how to get the most out of it. So let's start with the basics. When you start recording a meeting, you now automatically also turn on live transcriptions. So you don't need to turn those features on separately. Once you click record, it will automatically start a transcript at the same time. To start the recording, click on the ellipsis menu in the call and click the start recording button in that drop-down menu. Simple as that, and like I said, that will also start the transcription. Everyone in the meeting gets notified that recording and transcription have started. You can't make multiple recordings of the same meeting at the same time. If one person starts recording a meeting, that recording will be stored on the cloud and will be available to all participants after the meeting. So everyone who's been in that meeting will be able to access that recording. Meeting participants have the option of viewing the transcription during the meeting. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. They can, if they're struggling to hear correctly, or they want to make sure they have notes written down, they can access the transcription there and then to see what's being said. If one of the participants has a policy for compliance recording, the meeting will be recorded according to that policy, even if the participant is from another organisation. So this bit in particular, I think, is where we had the request for, because some of the organisations that we now work with, that I know that attend these webinars, do have specific requirements for compliance depending on their industry. And this is something that Microsoft has also taken on board and made changes to the recording features within Teams over the past year or so to make sure that they can work with any compliance requirements that their customers have. So looking into more detail on that compliance feature, there are options for compliant recording within Microsoft Teams. Compliance recording can be enabled on most Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Policy-based recording enables organisations that adopt Microsoft Teams for calling and meetings to set administrative policies to outline when calls and online meetings should be automatically recorded. So, for example, you might have an organisational policy to record certain customer calls, or you might have to abide by stricter compliance regulations depending on your industry for different types of calls. Teams can also support integration of third-party recording solutions. So if there's a program you have to use to meet your particular compliance regulations, we can integrate that. These integrations give you the platform functionality, user experiences and administrative interfaces needed to provide an end-to-end solution in which you can configure, manage, record, store and analyse all of your team's communications as and when you need to. Integrating these solutions isn't always the easiest thing, but there are Microsoft partners out there who can help you, and funnily enough, that includes Bedrock. So if that's something that's in a particular interest to your organisation currently, then do feel free to get in touch with us. It's all about looking at the outcomes that you need and the compliance requirements that you need to meet first. So we work backwards from there to build the technology that will support your business in the best possible way. So it's about finding out these compliance requirements and working out the best way that teams can work with you to do that. So that's just a really basic quick overview of Teams recording and Teams transcript, and in addition, the compliance regulations that you can abide by with Teams recording using built-in integrations. Like I said, that was actually a request from someone who attends these regularly. If you have something you'd like to see covered within these webinars, please do feel free to get in touch, drop something in the question box now, or later today I will be sending out the recording of this webinar, and you can reply directly to that to let me know if there's something in particular you'd like to see in a future webinar. I'll read all of those emails, so that's a good way to get in touch. So, having spoken about how Bedrock can help you do your integrations, we are now going to tell you how we can help going forwards with other implementations as well. We've devised a simple way to gain board level consensus on what's important, what can be fixed right now, and where you need a plan. And that is our IT strategy review. A strategic IT review will give you the facts you need to make a positive change, whether that's to drive adoption of new technology, hire an internal lead, brief a technology provider who could be Bedrock or could be someone else, or renegotiate with a current supplier. We're really good at untangling all the messy stuff that can sometimes seem like too much to deal with on top of all your day-to-day work. So whether that's compliance or difficult networking, just get in touch and we will tell you how we can help. Okay, I've seen some questions coming in, so please feel free to add some more as we go along, but I'm going to start with the questions that we've got already. So how does the sync back to SharePoint work if you work on an online copy and someone else works on the online copy? That's a good question. It will save both versions of those amended documents. So you will see in the document history when everything syncs back to SharePoint on the live version once you're connected to the cloud. You'll see a version history in that document. So all the changes will be there and you'll be able to pick the version that you want to go back to. So nothing will be lost, nothing will be completely deleted or changed, depending on which of those people's version you want to go with. And you'll be able to collaborate all of that together to make sure that you get the version that you need once everything's back in the live version. I've got another question saying, is there different versions on Windows 11? I'm really sorry, I must have missed when that came in to know which bit of the which new feature this applies to. As far as I'm aware, all of the features that I've covered today in today's webinar are available on Windows 10 and Windows 11. There's nothing that is unique to either of those, so you should be able to access all these new updates no matter what operating system you're currently on. Okay, we've got a little bit more time if anyone else has any other questions. I'm just going to ask Cara as well, who's on the call with me, to drop in the link if you'd like to sign up for the April edition of the What's New webinar. That will be happening on the 7th of April. So if you use the link that's published in the Q&A box now, you'll be able to sign up for that and get the latest updates as they come in from April. Obviously, we don't have much of an overview right now of what they might be, but that's what keeps it exciting. Okay. One more question. Do you have to sync everything you have in SharePoint to Teams? We would not want to sync all the historic archives. So this is something that we do have a SharePoint expert within Bedrock who is very good at tidying up all these folder hierarchies and how and working out how we tidy those up and get them in the right systems. There are ways to add private channels to make sure that not all files are accessible between Teams and SharePoint, but I'd have to know a little bit more detail, I think, about your specific requirement if we were going to look into that further. But yeah, there are ways to do it, and being a SharePoint admin is quite a specialist job. So that's Adam within Bedrock. He has quite a large job on his plate sometimes to try and tidy up some of these very tangled legacy systems. Oh, we've got a sudden flurry of questions now as well. How do I remove my camera when I am on a Teams meeting? I believe this is a new feature that you spoke about last month. Yes, indeed it is, Gary. We gave a quick overview to say this was coming up, and it should be widely available now. So all you need to do is right click on your video, and you should have the option to hide your video. That will just hide it from yourself though. That's not hiding it from the whole meeting. That is just so that you're not getting distracted by looking at your own video feed during the meeting. But yes, that should be widely available now. If it's not, you may need to speak to your admins about getting a system update. But yeah, it's, as far as I know, that's now completely live for everybody. Michael says, if you share a child folder within a team site to an external person, does the parent folder also get shared? No, if you share the link, you should be able to click the link and say share this folder with anyone who has the link, and that will share only that folder that you've selected. So that you don't need to worry about sharing entire hierarchies of folders. Just click on the folder that you specifically want to share, and that will be able to share it with the person. That will depend on what regulations your admin has set, whether you can share with internal only perhaps, or external people as well. It depends on your hierarchies that have been set within the organisation, but it's definitely possible, and you don't need to share the entire parent folder either. Okay, thank you everyone for your questions today. And Cara has shared the link to sign up for the next webinar. So please do sign up if you'd like to join us again on the 7th of April. And thank you very much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye.